I'm Jennifer Smith.
And I'm Melva Jones.
And we are Women's Health in Black and White. Today we're going to talk about bleeding in pregnancy.
Right.
Which isn't normal, but boy is it common.
It's very common.
Did you ever bleed?
No, luckily.
Very lucky. For 3 babies. That's very lucky.
That's lucky.
I had a bleeding incident with my first pregnancy. And I know exactly what caused it. I'll talk about that in a minute. Then my second kid, I bled every day for 16 weeks straight. 16 weeks.
Oh my
And
goodness.
some mornings it would be spotting.
Uh-huh.
And some mornings it would be heavy, like almost a period.
Wow.
And I would think, well, I'm going to miscarry today.
Mm-hmm.
She's 16 now.
Yeah.
She's still a problem. So, okay. If you call and you say, I'm bleeding, the very first question you're going to get asked is, when did you have sex last?
Right.
That is a common cause of bleeding in any trimester. And I'm going to walk you through this each trimester, what may have caused it, what we're going to do about it. But the very first question you're asked is, when did you have sex? And that's what caused it with my first kid.
Yeah.
We had sex on Thursday. I went to work on Friday, started bleeding, completely wigged out.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I was labor and delivery nurse and I shouldn't have wigged out, but I completely did
It's
because
different
I
once
had
you-
totally forgotten that we had sex.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I haven't had sex. I haven't done anything. I don't know why I'm bleeding. And then my husband showed up at the hospital and went, we had sex yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You get a pass.
All right, it's fine then.
Pregnancy brain is real.
Yeah, pregnancy is very, very real. Okay, so that's probably what caused it.
Right.
All right, first trimester. Things that can cause bleeding in pregnancy. Implantation bleeding.
Yeah.
That's a really big one. And a lot of people that are desperately trying to get pregnant, following their cycles, know exactly when they ovulated. This is when you're going to get the first freak out because they call absolutely freaked out. I know I'm pregnant. I took a positive pregnancy test, but I'm bleeding.
Yeah.
It's 10 to 14 days after you've ovulated.
Mm-hmm.
That's implantation bleeding. That's that little egg working its way into that juicy, rich lining of your uterus so it has a place to grow.
Yeah.
Of course, miscarriage. Of course, that's a possibility.
Oh, yeah.
If you miscarry, very likely it's going to start with spotting, pink, then bright red, cramping, and then eventually it'll be like a heavy period. I'm so sorry if this happens to you. There's nothing we can do.
Right.
The emergency room will not be able to fix this. They may not even be able to tell you for sure if that's what happened.
Right.
There's nothing they can do. It is not an emergency unless you are hemorrhaging, soaking a pad in under an hour, or cramping so badly that you need something for pain management.
Right.
That's it. Don't bother going to the emergency room. They're not going to be able to help you. Call us the next morning. As soon as the office open, we'll get you in. We'll figure it out. Ectopic pregnancies can cause bleeding, especially ectopic pregnancies that don't occur in the fallopian tube. That's really when you're going to get bleeding. If it's in the fallopian tube, you're probably going to have pain way before you have bleeding, but it's possible. A molar pregnancy. We talked about that when we talked about conception and a little bit about miscarriage. Molar pregnancies are not pregnancies. It's not mama's DNA and daddy's DNA that makes a baby.
Yeah.
It's only a part of the DNA needed. So it's never going to be a baby.
Right.
And it definitely can cause bleeding. There is something called a subchorionic hemorrhage. This is weird. It doesn't happen very often, but it seems to happen a lot.
It does.
It's not supposed to be very common.
Right.
I see it so much lately. Okay, picture an orange sitting in its peel. The orange is attached to the peel by those little white pith things. Consider those blood vessels. So the orange is the uterine, is the placenta. The peel is the uterine wall, and the blood vessels attach the two. You can lose a little piece of those blood vessels, and nothing bad happens to the placenta.
Right.
But it does bleed behind there. A little bruise forms where those blood vessels have detached.
Right.
That little bit of bleeding will start to come out. And it could be bright red. It's probably going to be brown. It may be a lot. Again, the emergency room can't help you. They might be able to identify it, but they can't fix it. Nothing's going to fix it. And it very rarely results in miscarriage.
Right.
If it happens, though, absolutely let us know as soon as the office is open. Sex. Sex causes bleeding. Because, as we talked about, with all of the swelling, the extra blood volume when you're pregnant, if your cervix gets hit, it can bleed. Also, though, you can have infections like bacterial vaginosis, yeast, gonorrhea, chlamydia, trichomonas that can cause irritation in the cervix and bleeding. And then there's something called a cervical polyp, kind of like a little blood blister on the cervix. And if it pops, it's going to bleed. The important thing about bleeding in early pregnancy is we sure do need to know your blood type.
Yes.
If
very important.
mama has a negative blood type, she's A negative, B negative, O negative, AB negative, and daddy has a positive blood type, there can be an interaction between the two blood types because the baby could be potentially positive. And that little positive baby growing in that negative mama creates an immune response. The body says, this is not us.
Right.
This is foreign. And it builds an immune response to fight against it. First kid's probably fine.
Right.
But if we don't treat it, the second kid could end in spontaneous miscarriage or even a very, very, very sick baby.
Yeah.
The way that we treat it is we pull this con job on your immune system. We give you something called Rogam. It's weakened antibodies. They float around in your immune system and your body goes, cool, I already got these.
Right.
So it never builds the factories to make more of them. They die in about 90 days. By the end of that period, all the fetal cells that you would have been exposed to will be gone too. So your body will never have created an immune response, and it's like starting over from scratch again.
Right.
You'll get this every pregnancy if you're Rh negative at about 28 weeks. And then we take a little bit of blood from your kid's cord and type it. If your baby turns out to be positive, you'll get it again after delivery. But anytime you have early pregnancy bleeding for any reason, we want to go ahead and give it to you early. So if you know you're an Rh negative mama and you have any vaginal bleeding, you need to call us as soon as the office is open.
Yeah.
If you don't know your blood type, you need to call us as soon as the office is open. If you know you're positive, though, you can forget everything I just said.
Right.
Second trimester bleeding. It could be sex. I'm going to say that again, like the third trimester. It could be an incompetent cervix.
Yeah.
What this means is that your cervix just doesn't hold together. And as the weight of the baby grows, it begins to dilate, usually painlessly, without contractions. These women aren't hurting. They just come in and they're bleeding and they're dilated.
Yeah.
You can lose a baby because of an incompetent cervix. So in the second trimester, if you're bleeding and you haven't just had sex, you need to call us right away.
Right.
You can still lose a baby in the second trimester. The vast majority of miscarriages happen before 12 weeks. Just because you're 16 weeks doesn't mean you're absolutely in the clear. So again, you could have the beginnings of a miscarriage. You could have something called a placental abruption. Don't forget about this, guys. This is really, really rare. Unless there's something going on with you that increases your risk, like high blood pressure or drug use. But if everything else is normal, placental abruption, especially as early as the second trimester, is very rare.
Right.
If it does happen, you'll get bad pain in your abdomen, your back, and bleeding. And your belly will be pretty rigid.
Hard, yeah.
Preterm labor can definitely cause bleeding. So if you're cramping, especially if you're cramping more than 4 times in an hour, and you have any bleeding, you need to call us right away. If you're cramping more than 4 times in an hour and bleeding, don't wait for the office to be open. Call or go on into labor and delivery.
Right.
Cervical issues, we talked about infection can do it. Cervical polyps can do it. Having your cervix hit during intercourse can do it. All of those things just like before. And then there is one very, very rare condition, uterine rupture. Your base risk with no previous surgery on your uterus for having your uterus rupture, that's where the muscle of the uterus tears, is less than 0.1%. You are more likely to be hit by lightning than you are to have the muscle of your uterus tear. Far more likely. If it happens, it'll be intense pain, rock hard abdomen, and you will have bleeding. Not bleeding. You will have hemorrhaging. This is a call 911 situation.
Right.
This is not a just mosey up to labor and delivery. This is not wait for tomorrow morning. This is call 911.
Yeah.
If you've never had surgery on your uterus, though, it's not going to happen. If you have a history of a C-section, especially a history of C-section with closely spaced pregnancies, this is something I want you to be not real cautious about, but in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Definitely in the back of your mind if you start seeing some bleeding. Term. You're term pregnant. You are at least 36 weeks, which isn't technically term, but we wouldn't stop labor.
Right.
all the way up to 42. If you wipe and see blood, could just be in early labor.
Right.
Not a big deal. If you've just had sex, if you've just had your cervix checked, if you're having contractions, or if you have cervical issues like discharge, itching, and possible cervical infection, you could have some bleeding.
Right.
You don't necessarily have to call me at 2 a.m. because you wiped and saw pink.
Yeah.
It's fine. If you've got blood running down your leg, though,
that's different.
you need to go to labor and delivery. Okay, so when to know, when to call us, how to get in touch with us, and when. In your first trimester, you're in the bathroom, you wipe, and you see a little pink. And you don't ever see pink again that whole day.
You're good.
Don't worry about it. Just tell me about it next time you see me. It's fine. First trimester, you wipe and see bright red, but you never see it again all day. Tell me about it next time you see me. You wipe and see red, and you see it again in 2 hours, and you see it again in 2 hours, you need to call the office.
Yeah.
Call right away for heavy bleeding, especially if you're soaking through a pad in under an hour or you're passing clots.
Right.
Or if you have fever, chills, or pain. The emergency room is not the place to go unless you're hemorrhaging. Just call the office as soon as we're open. Second trimester. Call that day if you have any bleeding at all, even if it goes away.
Yeah.
Don't wait till the next day. Don't wait till your next visit. Call and tell me you had bleeding. Let me talk to you. Let me find out what I think's going on. Call immediately or go to labor and delivery for bleeding that soaks a pad, pain, cramping or contractions, and clots. Anything like that, you need immediate attention. So you can call the office if we're open. We're happy to work you in. But if we're not open, or if you don't get a call back in the next hour, just go on up to labor and delivery.
Right.
We'll take care of it. Third trimester. If you think you're in labor, go to labor and delivery. It's pretty easy, but you'd be surprised how people get that confused.
Right.
If it's running down your leg, if your belly is hard, rigid, and tender, if you're having clots, go to labor and delivery.
Right.
If you've just had an exam, if you come into my office for a normal exam, I check your cervix with my fingers, you walk out and 2 hours later sit down and wipe and think, it's okay.
Yeah.
Call me and tell me, but don't freak out.
Right.
I checked you, that's probably why you're bleeding. If you have sex, probably why you're bleeding. But any sign of labor, so cramping, bleeding, leaking of fluid, that's water running down your leg, or if you have any other concerns, I trust mama's gut.
Yeah.
If you're term pregnant and you think, there is something
not
wrong,
yeah,
we should check it out. So that's a little overview of bleeding. It doesn't always mean miscarriage. In fact, it mostly doesn't mean miscarriage. But we do want to know, especially if we know that your blood type is Rh negative, and that's one of the things that we test you for at your new OB visit.
Right.
So if you have any questions about bleeding, you can write to us on Facebook or Instagram. You can check us out check out our podcast Afterglow, and stay tuned because we've got some interesting stuff coming.
Right. See ya.